McHargue.
Taylor McHargue, former Rice quarterback, ESPN college football analyst, and joins us on 365 Sports. He has a game involving future Big 12 member Cincinnati this week after their tough game against Arkansas. Very competitive game, but falling a little bit short. Let's start with them. Taylor, what did you see from them? They just didn't have quite enough oomph. Obviously, replacing Ritter at quarterback among some other things. And your thoughts as you study for them this weekend?
Yeah, I think once you turn on the tape, you realize that they had a much better chance in that game than I think people give them credit for. The storyline after the game was, it never really was that close. But it ends up being a 7-point game, and a big reason why is Ben Bryant and that offense played well in the second half. And I think the biggest key is in the first half, they just missed some of their shot plays that in the second half they capitalized on. But this is still a very good football team. They've reloaded in a couple spots that, I know on the defensive side, they lost all the draft picks through the NFL, but man, they found a guy at linebacker people probably haven't heard of, Ivan Pace Jr. Get to know that name. He was the defensive player of the year in the MAC on defense, transferred to play with his brother. And man, he was all over the field against Arkansas, and he's a really special player for them.
Taylor, Texas and Alabama this week is the biggest, the game day game. That's the one everybody's got their eyes on. But is Texas ready to hang with Alabama, or will this be a thing where they have their moments, but Alabama's ultimately too deep?
I don't think they have a chance in this game. I went on record earlier today and said the same thing, and I don't say it in any sort of, look, I'm based in Austin, and selfishly, I think the city is more fun when Texas is good. So I would love for Texas to get back to being relevant. Unfortunately, they don't have the depth, in my opinion, to compete with Alabama, and I worry about their ability just to keep up because Alabama's going to score. They're going to get theirs, and I just don't think this Texas offense is going to do enough to keep it close. I think there's a reason this line is 20 points right now. Excuse me. I think that feels about right.
Taylor, Spencer Sanders in Oklahoma State taking on Arizona State. Interesting quarterback matchup here just because of Arizona State, the transfer. But Spencer Sanders, is this the year that he can kind of limit the self-mistakes and be that player that he is when he's at his best throughout?
Well, I've talked about with you guys in the past. I remember going to was at the game at Oklahoma State when he played Texas, and he was the reason they were in that game late. Mm-hmm. And there's so much to like about Spencer Sanders, and the upside is so high. But you're right, the turnovers at critical points of the game have killed him. And this is a hopefully a game where you can step forward and see has he turned the corner. But I think it's going to take a body of work. It's going to take multiple games where you get in crunch time and have it be late in the third and fourth quarter and make sure that he doesn't have turnovers because that's been his Achilles heel.
The Baylor and Brigham Young game up in Provo. News today came down. ESPN's Pete Thamel reporting that neither Nakua or Romney will be available for Jaron Allen, who's still, Jaron Hall, who's explosive, but will not be available. And, of course, Baylor has a lot of the young, skilled people gone from last year's game. Your thoughts about how that affects what BYU tries to do?
Well, it's really impactful, especially because the strength of Baylor the past couple seasons has been on the defensive side of the ball. And look, this game is going to be really entertaining for a number of reasons. Number one, playing in Provo is difficult. And I don't know how many people have paid attention, over the course of time and paid attention to BYU night games, but they're going to have this place rocking. It's a really difficult place to play. And this is going to be a true test where if Baylor were to come away and win this game, I think you can start those way too early outside shot at a playoff type prediction and making another run at the Big 12 championship because this will be a really impressive win if Baylor can go up. And I understand BYU does have a couple guys that they're down at their skill positions, but man, this is still going to be a really impressive win if Baylor can go up there and get a win in Provo.
Did you guys ever play there, Taylor, when you were in college?
We did not, thank God.
All right, you saw Texas Tech last week. They've got a big game against Houston, who had all they wanted from UTSA on Saturday in that triple overtime game that was an instant classic. What do you think about this one? And is Houston where they can close the gap from where they lost that game against Texas Tech last year, or where are they?
Well, Texas Tech, the biggest thing that jumped out to me was that Donovan Smith is – he was the backup, but when Tyler Shuck goes down, Donovan Smith is a very capable starter for Texas Tech. And that competition was close down the stretch, and we saw why. Donovan Smith comes in the second quarter and really played well. I understand it's against Murray State, but he looked really sharp, in command of their offense. For Houston, what I'm interested to see is how do they expand their playbook and how do they create those explosive plays that they missed against UTSA? Because UTSA should have won that game. For U of H fans, you were outgained by about 100 yards and ran for, I want to say, a little over 100 yards total. Really wasn't a great performance on the opposite side of the ball, but Clayton Tune played up to what you would expect from your senior quarterback that is the leader and captain of that team. He did some special things late, a lot of it with his legs, and capped off by that 2-point conversion to win the game for them. But against Texas Tech, that Zach Kitley offense for Texas Tech is going to score, and so U of H is going to have to figure out a way to manufacture some more of those shot plays, those explosive plays, because I see this being sort of one of those classic South Texas shootout. U of H is going to have to keep up offensively in order to win that game.
Taylor McHargue with us, ESPN college football analyst. There were a couple of games that were of highly ranked teams. For example, Georgia home against Oregon, and they blow their doors off. There was the Notre Dame game in Ohio State that was tight really throughout, but Ohio State eventually pulled away. Did you at times blink when you saw what Georgia was doing to Oregon, even though they were pretty heavy favorites?
I thought that was, and I'm going to echo something that Jesse Palmer with ESPN said because I thought it was spot on. I thought it was Stetson Bennett's most impressive performance at quarterback for Georgia. I thought he was lights out. And Georgia is miles ahead of where Oregon is right now. But even still, Stetson Bennett played really well and was efficient. He was on time. He was in total command of that offense. And you're just looking at two teams that are, again, name brand teams that everybody's heard of these two schools, but the 5 stars and the 4 stars that Kirby has built up and recruited year over year, that's a departure from what they have in Oregon right now. And that goes back to what I was talking about with Texas. I think people don't give enough credit to what Alabama has on defense relative to what Texas is going to show on offense. And there's a gap. And that's why you see you'll have name brand teams and you see a blowout. And you're like, well, how does Oregon get beat by almost 50? Well, you've got, not only do you have the talent on those rosters like a Georgia, but they've been in the system for 2 or 3 years. And that's what you have with Alabama as well. The last thing I will say, I was impressed with Notre Dame's ability to turn that game into a rock fight, make it a defensive struggle, make Ohio State earn it. And then credit to Ohio State for being physical and saying, okay, fine, we'll run right at you and we'll win this the ugly way.
Taylor, Iowa State and Iowa this week is a huge rivalry. Iowa State has not really done much in that rivalry in the last, 7 years, I think. But Iowa just went out against South Dakota State last week and scored 7 points without scoring a touchdown. Is this Iowa State's year to break the curse?
God, I hope so. That Iowa game, I watched the end of it because you're part of you is almost hoping that they somehow lose. They deserve to lose that game. But you would hope that Iowa State could figure out a way to put enough out there on offense they can beat this Iowa team. Because Iowa's offense, it would not surprise me if you see somebody else at quarterback for Iowa this week, number one. But completely inept on offense, ran right at them the entire game, accomplished very little. And if you see the same thing against Iowa State this week, they're going to get beat.
Yep, it is that time. It's that I love these games, Taylor. The evidence of non-conference games. We just had Aaron Suttles from the Athletic on Alabama's first non-conference road trip since 2011 at Penn State. The games on campus as a player, conference or non, were road trips. Obviously, you'd rather be at home. Were they just kind of unique and fun because you saw different places?
I always thought so, and I think the same thing now covering the sport. I mean, I'm in Cincinnati today. It was the first time I'd been to Nippert Stadium. I thought, hey, this is a great venue for college football. As a player, yeah, especially at a place like Rice where going to play at Texas and a Baylor, those were our opportunities to play in front of big crowds because you weren't going to get them at historic Rice Stadium. As much as I love my alma mater, we're not known for our capacity crowds. But if you're talking about at the highest level of college football, I can understand why if I'm Alabama, I'm going to try and get these at a neutral site, number one, for recruiting, but number two, because I don't want to go play in this environment they're going to go into in Austin. Now, I think it's going to go in their favor because they're just a much better team. But I understand the thought process at the highest level. As a fan, I wish that they totally did away with the neutral site game. I wish you had more home and home, and you Alabama going to Texas. That's much more interesting to me than a neutral site where they played this in, a Jerry World or something like that.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate your time. Good luck with the game tomorrow. Cincinnati at Nippert, as you mentioned, one of the great settings as well, and what a run they had, the Bearcats, a year ago, coming off the loss in Fayetteville against Arkansas. They were there, but yeah, it almost reminded me of a game with